The story opens with the Dover Express, a swift and prestigious night train, hurtling through the darkened English countryside on its journey from London to the coastal port of Dover. The rhythmic clatter of wheels against tracks and the occasional whistle piercing the night create an atmosphere of both urgency and isolation, a perfect setting for an impending mystery. Inside the first-class carriage, the passengers are a mix of the ordinary and the enigmatic. Among them is Sir John Lavington, a wealthy and somewhat imperious businessman, known for his sharp dealings and perhaps a few well-kept secrets. His presence on the train is not incidental. He is carrying something of great value, a cache of precious jewels, intended for a discreet transaction upon arrival in Dover. At his side is Harold Derwin, his personal secretary. Derwin is a man of quiet demeanor, efficient and unobtrusive, the very picture of loyalty. Yet, there is something in his manner, an occasional flicker of tension, a hesitation in his speech, that suggests deeper currents beneath his composed exterior. Elsewhere in the carriage, another figure draws subtle attention, a suspicious-looking passenger who keeps to himself, his eyes darting occasionally toward Sir John's compartment. Though his identity is unclear at first, his presence adds an undercurrent of unease. Is he merely a nervous traveler, or does he have a more sinister interest in the wealthy businessman? The train makes a brief, almost insignificant stop at a minor station. No one notable boards or alights, and the night presses on. Inside Sir John's compartment, the two men settle into the journey, one unaware that his fate is already sealed, the other perhaps all too aware. The stage is now set. The players are in place, and as the Dover Express races onward, the threads of an impossible crime begin to weave themselves together. The night deepens as the Dover Express thunders onward, its steel frame cutting through the darkness like a blade. Inside the first-class compartment, Sir John Lavington and his secretary, Harold Derwin, sit in uneasy silence. The rhythmic clatter of the train's wheels fills the space between them, steady, relentless, almost hypnotic. Then, without warning, the train slows. A minor station flashes by, little more than a shadow in the night. No passengers board, no doors slam. The stop is so brief it barely registers, except for what happens next. Derwin, perhaps sensing something amiss, glances at his employer. Sir John, ever the commanding presence, seems undisturbed, his gaze fixed on some distant thought. The compartment door remains shut, the corridor outside empty. The world beyond the window is a blur of black and silver. Time passes, minutes, perhaps an hour, before Derwin stirs again. Something feels wrong. He turns to Sir John, intending to speak, but the words die in his throat. The compartment is empty. Sir John is gone. Derwin's breath catches. He scans the small space, no sign of struggle, no trace of forced entry. The door is still locked from the inside. The window is closed. It's as if the man has simply evaporated into the night. Panic rising, Derwin stumbles into the corridor, calling for the conductor. The train is searched, compartment by compartment, but there is no sign of Sir John. The other passengers stare in bewilderment. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. A man has disappeared from a locked room on a moving train. This moment is the heart of the mystery, the vanishing act that defies logic. The scene plays on the reader's instinctive disbelief. The door was secured from the inside. No assailant could have entered or left without leaving traces. Even if Sir John had jumped, his body would have been found near the tracks immediately, not miles later. No screams, no struggle, just an absence where a man should be. The disappearance feels supernatural, yet the story insists there is a rational explanation. The question hangs in the air, thick as the steam from the engine. How does a man vanish from a speeding train without a single soul noticing? The answer, when it comes, will be as methodical as the crime is audacious. But for now, the night swallows Sir John whole, and the Dover Express races on, carrying its secrets toward the dawn. The first light of morning creeps over the countryside as the Dover Express pulls into its final destination, its mystery still unresolved. The train staff and passengers disperse, shaken by the night's inexplicable events, but the truth remains as elusive as the missing man himself. Then, the news comes, not from the train, but from the trackside. A railway worker, trudging along the embankment with his lantern still lit against the dawn's dim glow, stumbles upon something unnatural in the dew-damp grass. At first, it might be a discarded coat, a heap of rags. But no. The shape is too deliberate, too human. Sir John Lavington lies dead beside the rails, his body twisted in a way that speaks of violent momentum. His expensive clothes are torn, his face pale in the creeping daylight. The ground around him shows no signs of a struggle, only the terrible stillness of a man who met his end somewhere else and was deposited here like freight gone astray. A doctor is summoned, then the police. The examination is swift and grim. Sir John died from the fall, yes, but not here. The lack of blood on the tracks, the nature of his injuries. He was already dead, or nearly so, when his body met the earth. This was no accident. A man does not simply tumble from a locked compartment without cause. This was no suicide. Sir John had no reason to end his life, and certainly not in such a bizarre, theatrical manner. This was murder. But how? The train was moving. The door was locked. The window was sealed. The local constabulary, baffled, sends for Scotland Yard. And so enters Inspector Joseph French, a man whose reputation for methodical thinking is matched only by his patience for the impossible. As he stands over the body, his eyes trace an invisible line back along the tracks, back to the Dover Express, back to the locked compartment, back to the last man who saw Sir John alive. The game is afoot. The first-class carriage of the Dover Express sits silent now, its usual elegance rendered eerie by the morning's grim discovery. Inspector Joseph French steps inside, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The faint scuff on the brass door handle, the precise alignment of the window latch, even the way dust has settled on the leather seats. This compartment is a puzzle box, and he intends to solve it. He begins with the door, the first impossibility. Locked from the inside, the mechanism shows no signs of tampering. Yet a man has vanished from this very room. French's fingers trace the edges, testing, probing. Could a key have been turned from the outside with some clever trick? A thin wire, perhaps? Or a duplicate key left in the lock? The idea lingers, but the evidence refuses to cooperate. Next, the window. It's shut firmly now, but is that how it was all night? He examines the frame, the latch, the sill. A faint mark, almost imperceptible, catches his eye. Something has rubbed against the edge here recently. Not enough to suggest forced entry, but enough to hint at movement. Could a man have been pushed through this narrow gap? The physics trouble him. A conscious man would have fought. An unconscious one would have left more signs of disturbance. Yet Sir John's body showed no defensive wounds. The compartment itself is unnaturally tidy. No overturned luggage, no disarray. If there was a struggle, it was brief, or, more likely, there was none at all. That suggests Sir John knew his killer, or was taken by surprise in an instant. French turns his attention to the passengers. Derwin, the secretary, is the obvious starting point. The man's story holds up. at first. He'd left the compartment briefly, returned to find Sir John gone. But there's a hesitation in his voice when pressed, a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not guilt, perhaps, but fear. Of exposure or something else. The other passengers offer little. The suspicious man, now revealed as a known jewel thief, has an alibi for the critical moments. The conductor recalls no disturbances. The pieces refuse to fit. Then, in a flash of insight, French reconsiders the window. Not as an exit for a living man, but for a dead one. If Sir John were already unconscious, or worse, when he left the train, the lack of struggle makes sense. But how? And who could have done it without being seen? The answer, when it comes, is as simple as it is brutal. The killer never left the compartment at all. The locked door was a ruse, not impossible, just ingeniously staged. The window was the true culprit, not for escape, but for disposal. The killer's confidence was his weakness. He thought the perfect crime left no traces, but every action leaves echoes. French's mind works like the gears of the train itself, steady, relentless, unstoppable. And as he pieces together the final fragments of the puzzle, one thing becomes clear. The most impossible crimes often have the simplest explanations. The investigation had stalled like a locomotive running out of steam, until Inspector French, rifling through Sir John's meticulously kept ledger, noticed the discrepancy. A single line item, innocuous at first glance. Jewels for Dover transaction, secured in compartment safe. The words seemed straightforward, but the implications sent a current through French's nerves. He had assumed Sir John's murder was personal, a crime of passion or vengeance. But what if it was colder than that? What if it was simply business? French's mind raced back to the suspicious passenger, the one who had kept his collar turned high, his gaze averted. The man had slipped away after the train's arrival, but not before French caught a glimpse of his record in the constabulary files. Arthur Creech, a known jewel thief with a penchant for high-stakes heists. Too convenient to ignore. A visit to Creech's usual haunts confirmed the man had been unusually flush with cash since the night of the murder. Yet when confronted, Creech's alibi was frustratingly solid. He'd been seen drinking in the dining car at the estimated time of death. The bartender remembered him clearly. The man had even made a show of toasting to better fortunes, his laughter ringing just a little too loud. For a moment, French wavered. Had he been wrong? Then came the breakthrough. Creech's alibi was airtight, but only for the time of the murder itself. The jewels had vanished after Sir John's death. And who had been alone with the body before the authorities arrived? Who had lingered just a little too long near the compartment as the train emptied? Harold Derwin. The pieces snapped together with a click. Derwin hadn't acted alone. He'd been the inside man. Creech had provided the expertise, Derwin the access. Together they'd staged the perfect crime, a murder disguised as a disappearance, a theft hidden behind a locked door. But perfection, as French knew, was an illusion. Every crime left traces, and this one had left a trail of glittering stones straight to the truth. The interrogation room at Scotland Yard was stark, its walls absorbing every word like blotting paper on fresh ink. Harold Derwin sat across from Inspector French, his fingers twitching against the edge of the table. A man who had gambled everything and was only now realizing the house always wins. French let the silence stretch, watching as Derwin's carefully constructed composure began to fracture. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, he laid out the truth. You didn't just discover Sir John was missing, Mr. Derwin. You made him disappear. The secretary's throat worked soundlessly. French continued, methodically dismantling the illusion. The locked compartment? A simple trick with a length of wire looped around the latch, allowing Derwin to pull it shut from the corridor after ejecting Sir John's body through the window. The lack of struggle? A sedative slipped into the old man's brandy, rendering him pliant as a doll. The jewels? Already transferred to Creech during the commotion of the discovery, their absence unnoticed in the chaos. Derwin's face drained of color as French revealed the damning detail. The window's weather strip bore minute fibers from Sir John's overcoat, invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. You counted on the locked door being the miracle, French said quietly. But miracles don't leave evidence. A stifled sob escaped Derwin as the full weight of his miscalculation crushed him. He'd orchestrated the perfect crime, save for one unchangeable truth. No man can outrun his own mistakes. The fragility of perfect crimes. Every action leaves echoes, no matter how carefully planned. Derwin's fatal flaw, underestimating French's relentless attention to minutiae. The real tragedy, a life thrown away not for wealth, but for the illusion of it. The scene closes with Derwin's whispered confession, his dreams of freedom dissolving like smoke. The arrest was an unceremonious affair, no dramatic struggle, no desperate pleas. Just the cold metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut around Harold Derwin's wrists as Inspector French recited the charges in a voice devoid of triumph. The secretary offered no resistance. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his own design. Outside the precinct, the first light of morning crept over London, indifferent to the small human tragedy unfolding within. The Dover Express would run again that night, its passengers oblivious to the horror that had unfolded in compartment B. Life, like the great locomotive steaming out of Victoria Station, moved ever forward. French watched as Derwin was led away, the man's polished facade finally shattered. In his pocket, the recovered jewels, a king's ransom in diamonds and sapphires, felt strangely insignificant. The real prize had always been the truth. As he turned up his collar against the morning chill, French allowed himself one satisfied exhale. Another impossible crime made possible. Another shadow lifted. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. Derwin's mundane motives, greed, desperation, made his crime more chilling than any grand villainy. Unlike flamboyant detectives, his victory feels earned through diligence rather than brilliance. Trains will keep running, compartments will stay locked, and human nature remains the greatest mystery of all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.